Marcus felt Lyra's anger spike, but she controlled it, channeling the emotion into focused determination. "They want to see what a war criminal can do," she said. "Let me show them." Lyra closed her eyes and extended her consciousness toward the Corvin fleet. But instead of the destructive force she had unleashed 18 months ago, she projected something entirely different, the memories of her people's civilization. The beauty of their cities, the knowledge they had shared freely with the galaxy. The Coven commander's voice changed, became confused. "What? What is this? These images, the people you destroyed." Lyra projected her thoughts directly into the minds of every Corvin in the fleet. "The civilization you ended. The knowledge you lost forever when you chose genocide." Marcus felt the psychic connection spreading, carrying not just images but emotions, the joy of healing, the satisfaction of preserved life, the deep connections that bound communities together. The Covens were experiencing firsthand what their bioweapon had destroyed. Some of the Corvin ships began to power down their weapons. Through the psychic link, Marcus could feel minds changing, perspectives shifting as the alien warriors experienced the beauty of what they had lost. But the commander's ship maintained its aggressive posture. "Tricks and illusions," he broadcast. "We came here for a weapon, not propaganda." Lyra's expression grew sad. "Then you have learned nothing." She focused her abilities more precisely, targeting only the commander's ship. But instead of destruction, she projected the memories of every being who had died from the Corvin bioweapon. Not just her own people, but dozens of other species that had fallen to Corvin aggression over the centuries. The weight of that accumulated death, that enormous loss of life and knowledge and beauty, crashed into the minds of the commander and his crew. It was not an attack, but a revelation. A moment of perfect understanding of what their choices had cost the galaxy. The commander's ship went silent. After several minutes, a different voice came through the communication system. "This is Navigation Officer Kex. Commander Thuval has had a breakdown. We're requesting permission to withdraw." Marcus squeezed Lyra's hand, feeling her exhaustion. "Through their connection, it's over," he said gently. Lyra nodded, tears streaming down her face. Some of them understood. Not all, but some. Maybe it's enough. Commander Walsh was staring at the sensor readings, showing the Corvin fleet beginning to disperse. 11 ships are withdrawing. The commander's ship is... They're just floating out there. Elena approached Lyra cautiously. "What did you do to them?" "I showed them the truth," Lyra replied. "The cost of their actions. Some minds can handle that knowledge. Others cannot." Over the following hours, the station received unexpected transmissions from several of the withdrawing Corvin ships. They were requesting asylum, asking for permission to defect from the Corvin Empire. The psychic connection with Lyra had awakened. Something in them, an understanding of what they had been fighting for and what they had been destroying. Marcus sat with Lyra in the station's observation deck, watching the stars together without barriers between them. "What happens now?" he asked. Lyra leaned against his shoulder, finally allowing herself to trust completely. "Now we heal. Not just me, but everyone who has been broken by this war. The Covens who want to change, the survivors of their attacks, the soldiers who carry trauma from battles they never wanted to fight. A new kind of medicine," Marcus mused. "A human kind of medicine," Lyra corrected. "You taught me that healing begins with seeing the person behind the pain. That is not something the Corvins understand, but it is something humans excel at." Elena joined them, carrying a data tablet filled with requests for medical assistance from dozens of species across the galaxy. "It seems word is spreading about what happened here. We're receiving requests for help from trauma victims, war refugees, even some former Corvin soldiers." Commander Walsh appeared behind them, looking tired but satisfied. "The Colonial Council has approved establishing a new medical facility here. They're calling it the Nexari Institute for Psychological Healing." Lyra smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her. "My people would be proud. We dreamed of a galaxy where healing was valued more than conquest." Marcus stood up, extending his hand to Lyra. Then let's make that dream real. As they walked together toward the medical facility that would become their new home, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The galaxy had called Lyra a weapon, a monster to be contained and feared. But he had seen something else. A healer who had been broken by war, a survivor who needed compassion more than containment. It was the most human thing he could have done, seeing potential where others saw only danger. And in doing so, he had not only saved Lyra, but had given the galaxy a new kind of hope. The Nexari Institute would become a beacon of healing in a universe too often defined by conflict, proving that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from building walls, but from tearing them down. The story of Lyra Vex and Marcus Chen would be told across the galaxy for generations. A reminder that true power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the courage to heal, to understand, and to choose compassion over fear. They had shown that even the most dangerous prisoner could become the most valuable ally when treated with dignity and respect. And in the end, that was the most human lesson of all, that everyone deserves a chance to be more than their worst moment, to heal from their deepest wounds and to find purpose in helping others do the same. Asterisk. Lyra's thoughts flowed into his consciousness, carrying images and emotions that painted a picture of a civilization dedicated to healing and knowledge. The Nexari had been the galaxy's premier medical practitioners, using their psychic abilities to diagnose and treat conditions that other species couldn't even detect. Their cities were built around great healing centers where beings from across the galaxy came for treatment. We were not warriors. Lyra's mental voice carried deep sadness. We studied life, preserved it, celebrated it. When the plague came, we tried to heal our world. We failed. Marcus felt her pain as if it were his own. But his years of medical training allowed him to process the emotion without being overwhelmed. The plague wasn't natural, was it? Lyra's mental response carried a spike of anger that made the containment chamber's energy readings fluctuate. Bioweapon, created by the Corvin Empire. They wanted our knowledge, but not our people. They thought they could take our healing centers, our libraries, our technology. They were wrong. What happened to them? I happened to them. Lyra's thoughts turned dark, and Marcus felt the raw power that lay beneath her controlled exterior. When I saw my people dying, when I realized what had been done to us, I lost control. The Corvin fleet that deployed the weapon, I destroyed them all. 17 ships, thousands of lives, gone in seconds. Marcus understood now why Lyra was so carefully contained. She wasn't just a traumatized survivor. She was a being capable of incredible destruction when pushed too far. You defended your people, that's not wrong. But it didn't save them, Lyra replied. I became the weapon the Corvins thought they were creating. I proved that even healers can become killers. Eleanor's voice came through Marcus's earpiece. Dr. Chen, we're getting reports of increased Corvin military activity in this sector. Intelligence suggests they're planning something. Marcus opened his eyes, meeting Lyra's gaze through the containment barrier. Her black eyes reflected a depth of pain that would have broken most minds, but also a strength that came from surviving the impossible. Lyra, what do you know about current Corvin operations? Lyra's expression hardened. They are still hunting, still trying to find and capture survivors from the species they have destroyed. They want to build armies of broken beings like me. Commander. Walsh's voice joined the conversation through the communication system. Dr. Chen, please ask her about their military capabilities. We need to know what we're dealing with. Marcus felt Lyra's flash of anger at being treated once again like a source of intelligence rather than a person. Commander, he said firmly, Lyra is not an asset to be exploited. She's a patient under my care. Dr. Chen, I understand your attachment to the subject, but we have a station full of researchers to protect. If the Corvins are coming, then we need to ask Lyra if she wants to help us. Marcus interrupted. Not demand that she provide information. The distinction was important, and Lyra felt it. Her psychic emanations, which had been growing agitated, settled back into calmer patterns. You would ask, not command? Always, Marcus replied. You've lost enough. I won't take your choices away, too. Lyra was quiet for a long moment, her mind touching his in a way that felt almost like gratitude. The Covens are not just hunting me. They are building a new weapon, something they call the empathy engine. It can take the psychic abilities of captured beings and amplify them, turn them into weapons of mass destruction. Elena's voice carried new urgency. Dr. Chen, our long-range sensors are detecting a Corvin fleet approaching. 12 ships, including what appears to be a new class of vessel we've never seen before. Marcus stood up, his mind racing through possibilities. Lyra, how do we stop them? You don't, Lyra replied, rising to her feet within the containment sphere. But I can? Commander Walsh's voice cut through the communication system. Absolutely not. Subject 19 remains contained. We'll handle this through diplomatic channels. Marcus looked at Lyra, seeing the determination in her expression. What are you planning? My abilities are not just for destruction, Lyra said. When properly controlled, when used with precision, they can heal instead of harm. I can show the Corvins what they threw away when they chose genocide over cooperation. Elena appeared in the containment chamber, her face pale with worry. Marcus, the Corvin fleet is demanding our immediate surrender. They're specifically asking for custody of Lyra. Marcus turned to Commander Walsh, who had also arrived in the chamber. Commander, we need to make a choice. We can hand Lyra over to the people who destroyed her world, or we can trust her to help us. Commander Walsh studied the monitors showing the approaching Corvin fleet. Dr. Chen, if we release her and she loses control, she could kill everyone on this station. And if we don't release her, Marcus replied, the Corvins will kill everyone on this station anyway. At least this way we're showing faith in someone who has every reason to want revenge but is choosing to help instead. Lyra pressed her hands against the containment barrier. Commander Walsh, I understand your fear. I have carried the weight of my people's deaths for too long. But Dr. Chen has shown me that there is another way. Let me heal instead of destroy. The Corvin fleet was now close enough that their ships were visible through the station's viewports. Commander Walsh looked at the display showing their weapons powering up, then at Lyra's contained form, then at Marcus's determined face. Release. The containment field, she ordered. The energy barriers surrounding Lyra's sphere dissolved, and for the first time in 18 months, she stepped out of her prison. The station's atmosphere felt strange against her skin, and she took a moment to adjust to the sensation of true freedom. Marcus approached her slowly, offering his hand. Are you ready? Lyra took his hand, and immediately Marcus felt the full scope of her abilities. She could have destroyed his mind in an instant, but instead she shared her strength with him, creating a psychic bond that would allow him to assist in what she was planning. I need you to help me focus, she explained. My abilities are most effective when I have an anchor, someone to help me maintain control. Elena was monitoring the Corvin fleet's approach. They're hailing us, demanding immediate surrender and transfer of the prisoner. Commander Walsh activated the communication system. This is Commander Walsh of Research Station Omega 7. We do not recognize your authority in this sector. The response came from a harsh-voiced Corvin commander. You harbor a war criminal who destroyed 17 ships of the Corvin Empire. Surrender her immediately or face the consequences. The Forbidden Zone, the transport shuttle's engines hummed quietly as Dr. Marcus. Chun pressed his face against the small viewport, watching Research Station Omega 7 grow larger against the starfield. The massive facility hung in space like a medal. Flower, its multiple rings rotating slowly around a central hub. Marcus had traveled 3 months to reach this remote outpost on the edge of known space. Drawn by research opportunities that promised to advance edobiology by decades, was not a typical scientist. His weathered hands bore scars from his years as a combat medic during the frontier wars, and his dark eyes held the steady patience of someone who had seen too much death. At 42, He had left military service to pursue his passion for understanding alien life forms, believing that knowledge could prevent the conflicts that had claimed so many of his friends. The assignment to Omega 7 represented the pinnacle of his career, a chance to study specimens that few humans had ever encountered. The docking procedure went smoothly, and Marcus found himself standing in the station's main airlock as pressurization completed. The doors hissed open to reveal Commander Sarah Walsh, a stern woman in her 50s whose silver hair was pulled back in a regulation style. Her blue uniform bore the insignia of the Colonial Research Division, but Marcus noticed she wore a sidearm. Unusual for a scientific facility. Dr. Chen, welcome to Omega 7, Commander Walsh said, extending her hand for a brief shake. Her grip was firm, her eyes calculating as they studied his face. I trust your journey was comfortable. Long but productive, Marcus replied, adjusting the strap of his equipment bag. I spent most of the time reviewing your research files. Fascinating work you're doing here. Commander Walsh's expression tightened slightly. Yes, well, there are aspects of our work that require careful handling. I'll give you the standard tour first, then we'll discuss your specific assignment. They walked through corridors lined with laboratories and living quarters, passing researchers in clean white coats who nodded politely but seemed distracted. Marcus noticed that many of the lab windows were reinforced with unusual thickness, and several doorways were sealed with multiple security barriers. The station felt more like a fortress than a research facility. How many specimens are you currently housing? Marcus asked as they passed a particularly heavily secured section. 17. Different species, Commander Walsh replied. Most are relatively harmless, suitable for standard biological analysis. However, we do maintain several high-security containment areas for more dangerous subjects. They entered an observation deck that overlooked the station's central hub. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Marcus could see a series of containment cells arranged around the station's core. Most appeared empty or housed small creatures, but one cell in the center drew his attention immediately. It was larger than the others, surrounded by warning lights and multiple layers of shielding. What's in that one? Marcus asked, pointing. To the central containment unit, Commander Walsh followed his gaze, and her jaw tightened. That, Dr. Chen, is Subject 19, also known as Lyra Vex. She's the reason we need to have a very serious conversation about safety protocols. Dr. Elena Reeves joined them on the observation deck, a young woman with brilliant green eyes and prematurely gray hair. She wore the same white coat as the other researchers, but Marcus noticed her hands shook slightly as she approached the windows overlooking the containment area. Dr. Chen, Elena said, her voice carrying a slight tremor. I'm the head researcher assigned to Subject 19's case. Commander Walsh probably wants me to give you the standard briefing about why that containment cell is absolutely off limits. Marcus studied the central cell more carefully. The shielding was so extensive that he couldn't see inside, but the energy readings displayed on nearby monitors suggested something incredibly powerful was contained within. What exactly is Subject 19? Elena exchanged a glance with Commander Walsh before answering. Lyra Vex is a member of a species called the Nexari. They possess natural psychic abilities that are lethal to most other life forms. We captured her 18 months ago after her homeworld was devastated by a plague that wiped out her entire species. She's the last of her kind, Marcus asked, feeling a familiar pang of sympathy. He had seen too many last survivors during the war. As far as we know, yes, Commander Walsh said grimly. And she's extremely dangerous. In the 18 months since her capture, 12 researchers have died attempting to study her. Their minds were literally burned out by exposure to her psychic emanations. Marcus frowned, studying the readings on the monitoring stations. 12 researchers? What were they trying to accomplish? Elena's hands clenched into fists. Communication, primarily. The Nexari were known to be highly intelligent, possibly more advanced than any species we've encountered. The potential knowledge we could gain from her is immeasurable, but Every attempt at contact has resulted in death. Yet you keep trying, Marcus observed. The potential benefits outweigh the risks, Commander Walsh said firmly. If we could find a way to safely communicate with her, we might learn technologies that could advance human civilization by centuries. Marcus walked closer to the observation window, studying the energy patterns displayed on the monitors. Something about the reading seemed familiar, though he couldn't place why. Has anyone considered that the deaths might not be intentional? Both women stared at him. What do you mean? Alina asked. I've seen similar patterns during the war, Marcus explained, his mind working through possibilities. Sometimes when soldiers were severely traumatized or isolated for extended periods, their stress responses became dangerous to others around them. Not because they wanted to hurt anyone, but because they couldn't control their reactions. Commander, Walsh's expression hardened. Dr. Chen, I understand you have experience with combat psychology, but this is different. Subject 19 is not human. Her abilities are alien, unpredictable, and absolutely lethal. Maybe, Marcus said quietly, still studying the monitors. Or maybe she's just scared and alone. Over the following days, Marcus threw himself into reviewing every piece of data the station had collected about Layer of X. The files painted a picture of a being of incredible power, whose very presence was deadly to other life forms. Yet as Marcus read deeper, he began to notice patterns that the other researchers had missed. The psychic emanations weren't random. They followed specific patterns that repeated every few hours, like a heartbeat or breathing rhythm. More interestingly, the intensity of these emanations seemed to correlate with attempts at communication. The more aggressively researchers tried to make contact, the more deadly Lyra's responses became. Marcus had worked with enough trauma victims to recognize the signs. Lyra wasn't attacking the researchers. She was having panic responses to their intrusions. Her psychic abilities were likely a defense mechanism that had gone into overdrive. Due to stress and isolation. Late one evening, Marcus made his way to the observation deck overlooking Lyra's containment cell. The station's night cycle had dimmed. The lights and most of the research staff had retired to their quarters. He stood alone before the massive windows, studying the energy readings that were his only window into Lyra's condition. You shouldn't be here alone. Elena's voice came from behind him. She approached cautiously, as if the observation deck itself was dangerous. I had been thinking about the pattern analysis, Marcus said without turning around. Have you tried? Music? Elena blinked. Music? What do you mean? The psychic emanations follow rhythmic patterns. Music is mathematical, harmonic. It might be a way to communicate without triggering her defense responses. Dr. Chen, I admire your creativity, but we're not dealing with a frightened animal. This is a being whose thoughts can kill. Marcus finally turned to face her. Elena, in all your attempts at communication, has anyone ever tried showing her kindness instead of trying to extract information? Elena's face paled. Kindness? She's killed 12 people. 12 people who were trying to probe her mind, study her like a specimen. When was the last time someone simply tried to comfort her? Before Elena could respond, an alarm began sounding throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and Commander Walsh's voice echoed through the communication system. All personnel to emergency stations. We have a containment fluctuation in Cell 19. Marcus and Elena rushed to the central monitoring station, where they found Commander Walsh and her technical team watching an alarm as the energy readings from Lyra's cell spiked dramatically. The containment barriers were holding, but barely. What triggered it? Commander Walsh demanded. One of the technicians checked his instruments. Unknown, Commander. The fluctuation started approximately 3 minutes ago and shows no signs of decreasing. Marcus studied the energy patterns on the main display. The spikes weren't chaotic. They followed a specific rhythm that seemed almost ... musical. She's not trying to escape, he said suddenly. One of the technicians checked his instruments. Unknown, Commander. The fluctuation started approximately 3 minutes ago and shows no signs of decreasing. Marcus studied the energy patterns on the main display. The spikes weren't chaotic. They followed a specific rhythm that seemed almost dot 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 musical. She's not trying to escape, he said suddenly. What? Commander Walsh snapped. Look at the pattern. It's rhythmic, controlled. She's not attacking the barriers. She's trying to communicate. Elena stared at the display. You think she knows we're watching? Marcus nodded. She's been alone for 18 months, studied like a laboratory specimen. Maybe she's finally trying to reach out. Commander Walsh's expression remained skeptical. Or maybe she's preparing for another deadly outburst. I won't risk more lives on speculation. But Marcus was already moving toward the containment area. Then don't risk anyone else's life. Let me try. Absolutely not, Commander Walsh called after him. I won't authorize direct contact. Marcus paused at the doorway leading to the containment. Levels. Commander, I've spent years dealing with traumatized beings, both human and alien. Sometimes the greatest risk is doing nothing. Elena stepped forward. If Dr. Chung is right, if she's trying to communicate rather than attack, we might be missing the greatest opportunity in human history. Commander Walsh looked between them, clearly torn between protocol and possibility. Finally, she activated her communication device. Security team to containment level 7, full hazmat and shield protocols. Marcus descended to the containment level with Elena and the security team following at a safe distance. The corridors here were even more heavily shielded, with multiple barriers between the observation areas and the actual containment cells. As they approached cell 19, Marcus could feel something in the air, a subtle pressure that made his skin tingle. The containment cell was a marvel of engineering, a spherical chamber suspended in the center of a larger room by multiple energy fields. Inside the sphere, Marcus could finally see Lyra Vex clearly for the first time. She was humanoid but clearly alien, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with its own light. Her hair was long and silver, floating around her as if she were underwater. Most striking were her eyes, large and completely black, like pools of deep space. She sat in the center of her containment sphere, her legs crossed in a meditation pose. Her head was tilted back, and Marcus realized she was looking directly at him through all the barriers and shielding. When their eyes met, the energy readings spiked again. But this time Marcus felt something else. Recognition. She sees me, he whispered. Elena checked her instruments nervously. Psychic emanation levels are increasing. We should retreat. But Marcus stepped closer to the observation window. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand and placed it against the transparent barrier. Hello, Lyra, he said quietly. The energy readings fluctuated wildly for a moment, then settled into a steady, rhythmic pattern. Lyra's expression changed, the tension in her features softening slightly. She lifted her own hand and pressed it against the inner wall of her containment sphere, mirroring Marcus's gesture. Impossible, Elena breathed. The containment field should have killed you by now. Marcus felt a strange warmth spreading through his mind, not painful, but definitely alien. Images flashed through his consciousness, a beautiful world with cities. That seemed to grow from living crystal, beings with shimmering skin working together in perfect harmony. And then darkness, death, the end of everything. She's showing me her homeworld, Marcus said, tears streaming down his face. She's showing me what she lost. The images shifted, showing Lyra's capture, her imprisonment, the endless parade of researchers trying to probe her mind. Marcus felt her fear, her loneliness, her desperate desire to be understood rather than studied. She's not a weapon, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She's a survivor, just like any of us would be. Commander Walsh's voice crackled through. His earpiece. Dr. Chen, you need to disengage immediately. We're reading massive psychic energy buildup. But Marcus kept his hand pressed against the barrier. Lyra, he said gently, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to understand. The alien woman's black eyes seemed to fill with something that looked remarkably like hope. She spoke for the first time since her capture, her voice carrying harmonics. That resonated through the containment chamber. You... Different, You see pain, not power. Elena gasped. She's speaking. The translation matrix is working. Marcus smiled, feeling the connection between them growing stronger. I see someone who's been alone too long. Someone who needs a friend? Lyra's expression crumbled, and she pressed both hands against her containment sphere. Friends. All gone. World gone. I am last. I am ... got broken. No, Marcus said firmly. You're not broken. You're surviving. And you don't have to be alone anymore. The energy readings began to stabilize as Lyra's psychic emanations settled into a calmer pattern. For the first time in 18 months, the monitors showed her vital signs approaching something resembling normal ranges. Commander Walsh appeared beside Elena, staring in amazement at the readings. How is this possible? Marcus kept his focus on Lyra maintaining their connection. Sometimes the answer isn't more barriers or stronger containment. Sometimes it's just showing someone that not alone. Elena was frantically recording everything, her earlier fear replaced by scientific excitement. This changes everything. If we can establish stable communication, if we can help her process her trauma ... one step at a time, Marcus said. Right. Now, she just needs to know that someone cares. Lyra spoke again, her voice growing stronger. You help me? Even though others say I am danger, Marcus nodded. Everyone deserves compassion, Lyra, even when they're hurting. Especially when they're hurting. As the first day of communication came to an end, Marcus realized that they had crossed a threshold. The galaxy's most dangerous prisoner had become its most precious ally, all because someone had chosen to see her pain instead of her power. It was the most human thing he could have done, and it would change everything. Breaking through the darkness. 3 weeks had passed since the first successful communication with Lyra Vex, and Research Station Omega-7 had transformed into something resembling a diplomatic embassy rather than a containment facility. Dr. Marcus Chun spent hours, each day in the observation chamber, gradually building trust with the last survivor of the Nixari species. The deadly psychic emanations that had killed 12 researchers were now controlled, regulated through breathing exercises and meditation techniques that Marcus had adapted from his own military trauma therapy. Commander, Sarah Walsh stood in, her office reviewing the latest reports with a mixture of amazement and concern. The data showed that Lyra's containment requirements had decreased dramatically. Her psychic emissions were now at levels that could be managed with standard mental shielding, and her cooperation had allowed the research team to learn more about Nexari culture in 3 weeks than they had discovered in the previous 18 months. Dr. Elena Reeves entered the office carrying a data tablet, her earlier nervousness replaced by barely contained excitement. Commander, you need to see the LATEST translation results. Lyra has been sharing technical specifications for Nexari medical technology. Commander Walsh took the tablet, scanning the information with growing amazement. Regenerative cellular therapy, psychological trauma treatment that works at the neural level. This is centuries ahead of our current capabilities. That's not even the most remarkable part, Elena said, settling into a chair across from the commander's desk. She's been helping Dr. Chen develop new protocols for treating soldiers with combat-related psychic trauma. Apparently, some humans develop limited telepathic abilities under extreme stress, and our current treatment methods are completely inadequate. Through the office windows, they could see Marcus in the observation chamber, sitting cross-legged on the floor in front of Lyra's containment sphere. The alien woman was in a similar position, and both appeared to be deep in meditation. The energy readings displayed on nearby monitors showed their brain patterns synchronizing in a way that should have been impossible between different species. How is he doing it? Commander Walsh asked. Every other researcher who attempted. Direct psychic contact guide within minutes. Elena pulled up another set of readings on her tablet. Dr. Chen's background in combat medicine gives him unique advantages. He's naturally resistant to psychic intrusion because he learned to compartmentalize his thoughts during war. But more importantly, He approaches Lyra as a patient rather than a specimen. In the containment chamber, Marcus was indeed treating Lyra like a patient. He had recognized that her deadly psychic abilities were symptoms of severe trauma, rather than weapons of war. The Nexari, he had learned, were natural empaths whose psychic abilities were designed for healing and communication. Lyra's powers had become lethal only because she was trapped in a constant state of psychological distress. "Tell me about your people," Marcus said gently, maintaining the mental connection that allowed them to communicate more effectively than through spoken words.